now we have this back to top arrow here staying in the bottom right and fixed. However, this site's not very tall, and I also don't like it up here because showing up here because when we click on it, it just stays here because we're already at the top. So what I want to do is I want it to stay down here in the bottom right of the footer the whole time. No matter, I want it to, when we scroll, I want this to stay down there. So how do we do that? Well, we used fixed positioning on the last one, and now we're going to learn how to use relative and absolute positioning. So in order to do that, you take what you want to give the absolute positioning to. So we want to give this whole div back to top here, and we want to put it, we're positioning it relative to the footer. So we're going to put this div inside the footer. Let's give it the right indentation. We're going to save it, and we reload the page. It still has the fixed positioning, so it's not listening to anything. The fact that it's inside the footer, it doesn't matter to versus being outside. But what we can do is we know we want it to be positioned relative to the footer. So we have the footer highlighted. Now give the footer a position relative, right? And then we're going to come inside the footer and we're going to give this div a position of absolute. All right, now see when we scroll, it stays down there. So what's happening is when you give a div, or actually, I'm sorry, any HTML element, a position of absolute, it looks for a parent element that has a position of relative. Okay, so it looks, or actually fixed as well. It could have a position of fixed as well. But the easiest one is relative because we don't want the footer to be fixed. We want it to stay here. So we give it relative, and then it goes in position based on that parent element. So it goes bottom 20 pixels and right 20 pixels of the footer because that's the parent element that has the position relative. Okay, so let's go over here. Let's give the footer a position of relative. And notice, like, when we did that, let me go ahead and do this first. Position absolute. Notice that when we did that, it didn't affect anything over here. Like, it didn't change this image or anything else in here. When you give something a position of relative, it just, sets it up so that you can put absolute positioned child elements within it. And when you give an element a position of absolute, which we did to this div of back to top, then it just it doesn't affect any other positioning of any other elements outside of it. So nothing was changed, and we're good to go. That stays there. And now the site looks good. So now you know all the different types of positioning. So you know static, which is default, relative and absolute and how they work together, and then fixed as well.